In this lesson, we're going to learn how to start a basic HTML page. I'm going to start with the directory structure. I do have a few files open right now. Maybe I'll just click over to my browser here and we'll look at what we will do as a finished product. And it's a simple HTML page. I'll just point out at the top bar we actually have a name for the page, and I've said your full name, which you will place your actual name. And then the first title heading area, again, just use your full name in there. And we're going to attach some tags to these. We're going to attach H1 tags to create this large text. And we'll also create some paragraphs, as you can see indicated here. And the paragraphs are always separated by this space. So these are two paragraphs that are separated here. And the line break is the feature that causes me to return a line of code, like a line in the same paragraph, if you will. But it actually forces the return of the line, and that's again known as a line break. Then below that we have what we call an ordered list, and I'll show you how to make an ordered list, as well as what's called an unordered list, which uses bullets instead of numbers at the beginning of each item line. And then below that we have another line surrounded by what are called H2 tags, which is the second from the most emphasized. So we have H1 is the biggest, then H2, and they go all the way down to H6. And then below that we have an image. Now you'll notice this image is kind of like a returned line, and that's done by nesting the image inside of a paragraph. And I'll show you that in the code in a little while. And then finally at the bottom we have a hypertext link, which if I were to click this, it would take me to my DJO Lessons website. And I'm just going to hit the return button here now. So we're just going to build this, just a little basic web page, but it does have some text elements, some formatting of the text. We're including an image. We're going to include a list, and we'll also generate a hypertext link. So let me go over to the finished code, and then we'll build a new one here. So I've got the code in software called TextEdit because I'm on a Mac. If you're on a PC, I would recommend using Notepad, or if you have Notepad++, even better. It actually does color coding, where what I'm using does not do color coding. But let me just explain these lines of code. This is the whole page that you saw in code view. And again, a simple text editing software, any text editing software will do, as long as you end the file with a .html in the name. So I just called this coding 1B, which is our lesson plan, .html. And I'll show you the directory structure now actually, and then we'll come back to the code. So let me just go out to my Finder. And what you will have to do, and you'll have to do this for every website. So for every web assignment I give you, you'll have to do this. You'll have to create what's called a root folder. Now I've just created mine on my desktop, and I've opened it here. I've called it student work root. But the root folder is like the house that contains the whole website. Now inside of that house we can have other rooms, which in this case would be directories. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to create a folder inside of this folder that you'll call root. Maybe use your name as well, but it is what's called the root, the top level folder, and everything else goes inside. So inside of there I'd like you to create one more folder and call it images lowercase. Then download the asset on this lesson from my website, which is a picture file called 2dogs.jpg, and place it inside of that folder. What's important here with directory structure is elements on a web page are based on a link that we get through what's called a pathway, which is like a street address inside of a directory. And so we need to put our assets where they will go before we actually even place them on the page. Or it's better that we do that, because then we will see them manifest immediately. So what I have here is a folder called images with my image inside, and I can collapse that on the Mac, and my HTML page that I created using TextEdit would be Notepad on the PC. Alright, so that is your basic structure that I want you to build. It must be created as I've just demonstrated here. So let me go to this finished file called coding 1B, and that's over inside of TextEdit. And I'll explain each line of code here, and then we'll recreate this one at a time. Now, with an HTML page, it's basically, tags that are nesting elements inside of them. So there's 99% of the time there's what's called an opening tag, And in this case I have HTML as my opening tag, and then the same tag with a slash in front of it surrounded by these brackets here, and that's my closing HTML tag. That means everything inside of here is considered part of an HTML page. Now this line that comes before it, it is optional, but it is advisable that you use it. It just gives us the doc type, which means which HTML are we adhering to. This particular line with the exclamation doc type space HTML means that we are producing a web page that is designed for HTML5 standard. That is the latest standard for the HTML code, and this declares it as being friendly to that HTML5 standard, if you will. So beyond that, we have the HTML opening and closing code, and then inside of that there are typically two sections to a page. There's the head, which usually holds invisible background information, and we'll get into some of what can be held in there shortly. But up here is the opening tag and the closing tag, and the element, it's known as head, is everything within the tags. Now in this case I actually have a tag inside declaring the title, and the title is what you saw in the tab. So you have the title tag opening, the title tag closing, surrounding the text that you wish to create as your page title. Then again, with the head tag closed, we proceed to what's called the body tags. And the body tags is basically all the content that you will see on your web page. So we have the opening tag here, and if I scroll down, there is the closing body tag right there. Okay, so everything on the page that is visible will be in between the body tags. They may be influenced by code in the head, which we can get into later, but the actual elements on the page are contained inside of the body tag. So let's start with the first line here, and I'll just leave a space to maybe just accentuate that. We have our opening tag H1, which is the top heading tag, which means it'll be the largest heading tag. Then the text that we wish to have represented with that tag or displayed with that tag, and then surrounded or closed off by the closing tag, which always has a slash just before the tag name. So we have opening H1 and closing H1. And if I go back to my web page here, that is this line right here. Now a little thing you can do as well, and it depends on the browser, but if you go to the tools here, I can go to web developer and we can go to page source. Page source is the actual code, and there you can see the code on the page. This is exactly the same code as what you see over here in this file. Might be a little easier to understand actually, because it is color coded to an extent. So here's my H1 tag right here, followed by elements surrounded by paragraph tags. So again, if I go down here, there's the opening P tag, P for paragraph, and the slash P for closing. Now I've done that in these two areas right here, and in the middle of this body of text inside of that paragraph tag, I've got a unique tag which only requires the one tag. It's known as a line break. It's BR, optionally can also be /BR. They do the exact same thing right here, and what that does is it forces a return of the line without creating that space that is typically created from the declaration of a paragraph. So if we go back to our page once again here, and I'll actually go back here. Here's the first paragraph. Here's the second paragraph. And this break right here is what's generated by this tag here. So it creates a forced line break, but does not create that large gap in between the lines. And that's the distinction right there. Then what we have below here is a list. There are three list types. We're going to just focus on two, the ordered list and the unordered list. This one happens to be an ordered list. So that list is created with two sets of tags. So let me go to the code here. And here it is right here. Now I mentioned an ordered list. So we start with the main tag to declare the list itself, OL for ordered list, and then the closing tag /OL. Each line uses a tag called the line tag, which is LI. Again, there's your opening li, and then there's your slash li to close that line, and all the text in between will be on each unique line. So I have 3 lines here. Now if I was to copy this, paste it here, this would be a 4th line, and I'm just going to indent this just so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing here. And I'll just call this line 4. And if I go and update my browser, first I must save my file though. So I'm just going to go Command S on the keyboard. And if I go back to my browser and refresh it, I'm just going to go Command R on the Mac to refresh. We should see that new line appear in my list. And there it is right there. So you can see the code. When you're working just with text editors, you do need to save the file, then refresh the browser to see the new changes. Okay, so once again, if I go over here, I can refresh this as well. There's my 4th line that I put in. So this chunk here is a list, and these are the list items. If I wanted it to be an unordered list created with bullets, I would use UL. So let me just quickly demonstrate that. UL and then closing UL, save the file, go to the browser, refresh the page, and now you can see bullets instead of numbers. Okay, so that's an unordered list. I'll let you pick which one you want to use, but I do want you to do one of the 2 lists. Then after that we have another heading, smaller. It's using the H2 heading tags right here, H2, and then closing H2. So I want you to create one of those as well. And you'll notice too, in between paragraphs and lists and headings, you do get that same common distance, that same space on the height between the elements. Okay, and again, an element is something that starts on its own line, basically, where an inline element is something like the line break, for example. It's contained within an element. Okay, so now we're getting into some slightly trickier code here for the image. Let me just again show you that the image is on its own line. And to do that, we put it inside of a paragraph. So down here, I have the paragraph as the outer elements. And then the image, again, the image is one of those things that does not need a closing tag, but it does use attributes. So the basic image tag is img, and then space, then the attribute. So we can have as little as 1 attribute for image, which is a link to the actual file. So the code for that is src for source equals, so that's the property, and then the value of the property is beside the equal sign, and it's almost always inside of quote marks. And this happens to be the pathway relative to this file. So if we go out to the desktop, here's the file. Right beside it in the same folder, or in the same room if you will, we have a folder called images. Then inside of there we have the file we want to display. So if I go back to the pathway, images is the first element in the same folder, which is a folder itself. And with a slash, we're saying inside of this folder called images, retrieve the file called 2dogs.jpg. Now I've gone so far as to create more properties such as width and height, as well as an alternate name for the image called 2dogs. All of this doesn't have to be there, and it would appear exactly the same, but this is just being more specific, and it's a way for me to introduce to you various attributes. Now you can go in and you can change these, and I would invite you to try it, and it will change the size of your image. I will warn you, a best practice is to keep an image at its original size, so it's much better to size images in Photoshop, design them there, then have them applied on your web page. So once again, inside of the paragraph tags, I've got an image tag with several attributes, but the main attribute is the source equals the pathway to the desired image file to be displayed on the page. And because again it's between paragraph tags, it will appear below and not next to the previous element. Now finally here we have a hypertext link. Similar to the image tag, it's a tag with attributes that really define how it works. However, the link tag does have a closing tag. So right here you can see it right here. So So if we go back to the code, you can see again I do have a paragraph, set of tags surrounding it to put it on its own line. And then we have the opening tag, which has just the one attribute, which again is a pathway. And it happens to be an absolute pathway to a website, meaning it's the full HTTP address. So here it is, it's hypertext reference. So we have the A for link, space, hypertext reference, href equals, and then the value, which is in between the quote marks, is the web address. http://djolessons.com, which is my website. And then after that, we have the closing link tag, and then in between there, the text that will respond as a clickable link. So let's just look here again, and there you can see it directly below. This is a link to DJO Lessons, which is what we see highlighted, and because it's surrounded by the link tags here, it will act as a hypertext link. And then closing the whole thing off, again, we have the body tag, and ultimately closing the whole thing, the whole page, is the HTML tag. And that's just a brief lesson. I decided not to actually rebuild this. The explanation, I think, is more than adequate. You can freeze frame anytime you want if you want to look at the code to reproduce this, but I do want you to create this exactly the same. Then take your root folder, compress it using the zip format, and upload that to Blackboard. And that will be this one assignment. So again, let me just go back and review. There's our code. Inside of the browser, you can actually see it manifested there. So to run it in your browser, by the way, just after you've saved your file, just simply double click it. It will just manifest inside the browser as a new tab or a new window, depending on your settings. And then you can review that. And once again, here too, if you know how to access the page source, you can look at the code that way. And that's a way to basically lift code or study code on any web page that you come across anywhere. And that is your lesson for creating your first HTML page. And I'll just remind you, zip it up and hand it into Blackboard. Thank you.